it's personal or professional for a business, it helps create some clear boundaries. Otherwise, we just kind of get ourselves in trouble. We drift it off and go into dangerous areas. So having clear boundaries is good. Uh, some people are brought up thinking a budget's a bad thing. Hopefully, you don't have that opinion. Hopefully, you think a budget is a good guide. If you don't look at it as the rule, but more as the guide, then that helps you have a little bit more favorable reaction to a budget and the idea of it. It also helps help set healthy expectations. So when you look at the budget, you kind of think from beginning to end and what it's going to take to get from where you are to where you want to be, and you see what's really realistic. So that helps a little bit. Reduces surprises. Financial surprises are often negative and not positive, so it helps cut down on some of those. Establishes a realistic timeline. If you do the budget well, you get an idea about how long it's going to take for certain things to happen, and as money comes in and goes out, what's it look like over time? Because just because you sell something, sometimes you don't always get the money right away. Sometimes it takes a little time to get the money. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money, right? You have to buy goods and services, materials to build it, make it, assemble it, and then sell it. You don't get the payoff until the end. And then probably one of the greatest values is that it helps avoid debt if you do it well. Otherwise, our spending exceeds our income and we end up getting into debt, which is dangerous. Okay. Anybody have any other advantages or values of budgeting that they can think of? You'll take my list? Okay. You like my list? My list will do. Good. All right. Key elements of a business budget, right? There's cost and income. There's two sides to this, right? There's money coming in, money going out. The costs come into three different categories, if you will. There's startup cost. If just to go from zero to something, there's startup costs that you have that are unique to the startup, and then they turn into some other kind of cost, or they go away because you've already spent the money. Then there's fixed or overhead costs. That's synonymous. These are costs that you have like every month. You have them. That's your overhead cost. One of my goals with small businesses is try to reduce your fixed and overhead costs as much as you can. There's a lot of jobs that are really high level overhead costs, which are scary to me because you have to keep matching the revenue with it all the time. But if you can find a business, a business model that has low overhead, then there's less risk because you're not extended on the overhead every month. Then there's variable costs that come and go, right? You have to pay a licensing fee here, or you have to, based on how much you sell, determines how much you buy. And so that's variable costs that go up and down based on that supply and demand kind of thing for what you're selling. And then the income side is just revenue. Where does the money come from? Is it a loan? Is it a grant? Is it sales? Is it your savings? Where is this income coming from? And the whole goal, right, is that it doesn't just cover the cost, but it exceeds the cost so that you have a profit so that you can make money. That's obviously the goal. So when you're starting out, which one of these you think is the hardest to estimate? When you're starting out, what's the hardest to estimate of this?
I think startup cost, because you're at ground zero, and you're not quite sure yet what it's all gonna involve.
Right. You have no idea, right? It's just, you hope you know. There's some research you can do, but you hope you know what it is, right? Okay. Anybody else thought on that? That's better. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes revenue is hard to guess. You know what you're going to sell it for and how much you'll get if you sell it, but you don't really know how many you're going to sell. So you're just kind of projecting your revenue at that point. So that's a little bit tricky too, but at least there's a little bit of a formula. Like, okay, this unit costs this much, or I'm going to sell it for this much. I'm going to sell this many, then I can calculate what my estimated income is, right? Sometimes on the startup, you're right. You don't know what you don't know. Like I didn't know I needed I didn't know I was going to have to buy a postage machine to mail this stuff, right? I didn't know what that was going to be. Stuff like that.
I think too, the startup cost, you don't know what to spend because you don't know yet how much you're going to make. You have nothing.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, do I buy $1,000 worth of material to make $10,000 worth of profit? And what if I only sell $500 worth of
Right, right,
items? So I think it has to, for me, it was
yeah,
startup costs.
right,
I had no idea what I would make. I
yeah,
still don't. It's
and
still a big variable.
right, and it's a little bit tricky because even more tricky because you're thinking, okay, well, if I got $1,000 worth of this, I'm going to save some money because I'm buying at a higher quantity than if I got half of that. It's going to cost me more per unit, but I'm not extended as much because I'm being conservative, saying I'm just going to do half of this. Yeah, so you're all those little games and guesses you have to play to figure out the best way to do that, right? Okay. So startup costs, just by definition, and I'll send these out, right? These are the one-time purchases and of liquid and non-liquid assets like inventory, computers, furniture, vehicles, property, security deposits. And then there's startup, those are assets. And then the expenses are, could be fixed or variable expenses that you pay just to get going: rent, payroll, office space, trademarks, patents, these kind of things that you might have to have. So yeah, those are the really hard ones to kind of guess. Then the fixed overhead, almost the same every month, right? Your rent probably is the same amount every month then. Any payroll is pretty much the same. Business insurance, hosting, internet, all these kind of things. If you're paying legal or accounting, bank fees, hopefully you're not paying bank fees. I'm anti-bank fee guy. Just use the little banks, they don't charge bank fees. But you might have like processing fees, credit card fees. Those are unavoidable. Dues and subscriptions, these things just you're always going to have, right? So those are the fixed. And then the variable, they could increase or decrease based on your sales, production. They don't have a set monthly cost. So the materials to make the items you're selling, if you're doing that, how much you're going to spend on advertising, that could vary from time to time. Even your utilities, right? If your energy drives utility prices and all of that, inflation, all kinds of factors pushing all these changes, shipping costs, transportation, if you have transportation or paying for mileage, that kind of thing. So these are the variable ones. Okay, and then obviously revenue. It's important you kind of take two approaches to your revenue. Do a very conservative projection, and then you can take a real optimistic best case scenario projection too, because it's probably going to be somewhere in between. That's probably where it's going to be. But people, if you just pick one number, you have a greater chance of being wrong at just kind of picking one. So some people are very optimistic, and so they get really excited and happy, and I can sell a lot of these things. This will be great, and they bump the number up.